Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have Erick Strickland with me. Erick is a former Nebraska Cornhusker, an NBA player, and today is a business owner and entrepreneur. And so excited to highlight Erick's journey and how he's gotten to where he's at today. So, Erick, thanks so much for being on today.
Absolutely, Phil. Just one question. I do have a question, by the way.
Yeah,
Do you mind if I smoke my cigars while I have the interview?
absolutely not.
I'm
Enjoy
a
it.
cigar man. I'm a cigar man. So it's a relaxing time. So it helps me to relax a little bit while
I
I'm
love it.
talking to you and just get into my flow. How about that?
That sounds perfect. That
All
sounds
right.
perfect. Well, good. So, Erick, to start your journey, your dad was a athlete growing up, and then ended up going into the military, and had you kind of shortly after high school, if I understand correctly. So, talk about growing up in a military household.
Uh yeah, okay. It's kind of a long story. And
Mhm.
I will say the culmination of that just happened August the 6th when I went back to my hometown. So,
Hmm.
although I live in Nebraska, I consider myself to have been raised in Nebraska. I am not from Nebraska. My
Yeah.
father and my mother, I was born in Lee County Hospital in Opelika, Alabama. And August 6th, they even though I hadn't lived there, it was beautiful. It was truly an honor to have been recognized to have August 6th as Erick Strickland Day
Oh,
in
cool.
my hometown. So when you talk about that, there's history there. That's where it began. It began there as a young man, just very athletically gifted. Uh, I just had a passion for it. I always played against older kids because I had a big frame even as a young kid. So it was always 2, 3, 4 years older that I was running. We used to have this game. I don't know if you can even say it, the name of it now. I have to say the name of what it is because I don't know another name of it now. You may be able to give me another name, but this is what we called it. And this is no offense to anybody that is listening. It's just that's the name we called it back in the late 70s, early 80s. We called it Smear the Queer.
Yeah.
And we would toss the ball up in the air, and I'm just this little kid with all these other big kids, and and that's how I learned different things: how to be evasive, how to be shifty, how to be physical.
Yeah.
We would play. I ended up being drafted, as probably you have researched, by the Florida Marlins. We would go into the my grandmother and all the kids. It was very much community back then. Like
Yeah.
all the kids knew each other down the street, around the corner. Families knew each other from, you know, just not in your immediate next door neighbors. And we would all congregate in the circle where my grandmother lived. So we would play stick ball and just imagine trying to hit a tennis ball or any type of ball with a stick, right?
Yeah.
You had to be proficient at it. So that's where it all started. And then got into a little bit of trouble. Now, do you want me to be real and authentic, or do you want me
Yeah.
to tell you the false stories? All right.
No,
So,
real.
okay. So, uh, as a young kid in Alabama, at that time, it was very segregated. There were, black families that did well. There were some that didn't. There were, same thing, white families that did well. Some didn't. But the one thing that was consistent is that one side of the tracks was, black families, and
Yeah.
the other side of the tracks or other neighborhoods were whites, and that's just the way it was back then. And but the school is where we came together,
Yep.
and came to school. And like I said, I was super athletically gifted. And back then they had this thing called field days. I don't know how old you are, but
Yep.
we had these field days. They give out the ribbons. You would do all these different, running skills and bag hopping and just different things.
Yeah.
And you would get a ribbon for it. And
Yeah.
I would always have like all the blue ribbons, which is first place. And this one kid just happened to be Caucasian. He says to me, he said, "So what? N-word."
Mm.
And you know, uh, I was a very inquisitive kid. I've never been someone. I've always been a free thinker. I've never been someone who would just go with the status quo, or you can just tell me something. I'd be like, oh, okay, and I just agree with it. And I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to inquire. Yeah. And so this young man said that, and I said, what'd you say to me? I said, say it to my face again. And he did. And so, I swatted him about it, right?
Yeah.
And back then you used to get paddlings. And so I got disciplined with the paddling, and he really got like a detention or something. And so my mom and grandmother came up there and inquired about that situation, didn't like what the answers were. And my dad was in the Air Force. He was a second lieutenant in Malmstrom Air Force Base, which is in Great Falls, Montana. And she calls my dad and says, Eric, Eric's down here in school slapping white boys, and that's not good for him. You might want to come get him. And that's how the transition. So there's a part of me that felt an abandonment because my mom pretty much let me go. But I'm grateful as I look back at the history of it, because being with my dad was probably the best thing I needed in my growing up. And so I went from there, from Great Falls, Montana, 3 years in Vandenberg Air Force Base in Lompoc, California, and then on to Nebraska after that, where I didn't want to go, to be honest.
Shocker. So to talk about, that before we jump into the Nebraska days, I think, one thing that's always interesting whenever you have a childhood of moving around growing up, you have to learn certain life skills of, how to adapt, how to, connect with people quickly. And I think, you mentioned, hey, I was always gifted athletically. That can be one of those great equalizers. If you're the new kid, but you're really good at something, it can cause some frustration if the other really good kid is now not as good, but it can also give you an open door. So talk a little bit about, being good at athletics and how, connecting with people and learning how to do that quickly, was a lesson you were taught and be able to learn.
Again, not as much in Montana. So we'll go on to Lompoc, California, which is Lompoc is centered just north of Santa Barbara. It's in the San Ynez Valley. You have towns like San Luis Obispo and San Ynez and Santa Maria and so forth and so on, right?
Yeah.
And I think not too far from there is where you have Neverland. That's in that same kind of area. Yeah. And so it's the halfway point between San Francisco and LA.
Yeah.
And being there, it was pretty much the same. I show up there and I'm like I said, I'm a big kid. So just to give you an understanding where you can see it, I was 6'2" in the 8th grade.
Wow.
So you could just kind of track that back and know that I had size, right?
Yeah.
I was always kind of a big, stronger like kid. So they put me in, even though I shouldn't have been in this league. There's no way. There's two things occurred. I shouldn't have been in the Bantam League, which is the lowest league, the entry league for football. And we totally dominated. We won the Super Bowl. There's no team that could miss. It just wasn't going to happen. Total domination, right? So then my dad would put me in basketball, and we would play, and I totally dominated the as a fourth grader, I dominated the 4th and 5th grade league.
Yeah.
Okay. MVP of the league. Then I ended up the next year. My dad went to the league and said, "Listen, my son will totally destroy this league, and let him play in the 6th and 7th grade league." And they did. They accommodated me, and I ended up MVP of that league. So it's one of those things where I just was getting. And you're right. What it did do, Phil, is it did in some instances cause friction, because when I would go to school, kids wouldn't let me play.
Yeah, right.
And so it kind of halfway turned me into a mini bully, Because I'm like, look, I'm playing or I'm knocking people out. That's kind of how I was. Like, I'm either gonna knock you out or I'm gonna play. I mean, which one you want? And then they try, or I'm taking the ball. Like, that's kind of how it was. But because of that, people didn't want to play with me. What it did do for me that I was very appreciative of, it created in me a very imaginative mindset. So I literally would go work out by myself. I'd go out to the playground by myself, and I would play these games because, in California at the time, it's showtime. So Magic Johnson and the rivalry was the Celtics, and I would play like I was the Celtics against the Lakers or the Lakers against the Celtics, and I would work as if there is people defending me, and I would be working on moves and doing different things as if I was playing the game.
Yeah.
It was the same thing with baseball. Like I couldn't get people to really play with me, so I'd go out and I would throw balls as like a pitcher against the garage and act like I was having my own little baseball game and running the base. I had a very imaginative mind. That's what I had to do during that time frame. And because of the friction that it created with, being very athletically gifted. And then as I got to, I can wait till you ask another question, but it carried on when I finally got to Nebraska. I'll let you decide if you want me to carry that on or you want to take it there.
Chat with or go over the transition to Bellevue West.
Yeah. So then 7th grade, I got to Mission Junior High in Nebraska right in the middle of the wintertime. So I missed basketball. Very disappointed. Yeah. But the one thing that I'd say I love about my dad is that my dad, challenged me. He never really told me I was good, which always caused a work ethic in me to want to be pleasing and be better and to finally get him to say it. So I continued to work. Yeah. But he always would take me to places like the base gym. So as a 7th and 8th grader, so I missed my 7th grade year, 8th grade year, totally dominated. Like it was crazy. Because in football and in basketball, our 8th grade team would beat the 9th grade team because we were just that good, right? Yeah. I mean, obviously having me help, but we would beat them. And so my dad in that time would take me to the base gym and I would always play against men. And they would be like, no, he can't play. He can't play. And my dad would be like, he's playing. And they would try to get physical with me. And that helped me because if you watch my basketball career, you would know that I don't mind mixing it up. I don't care if you're Shaq. I've guarded Tim Duncan. I can tell you those stories when we get to the NBA. Yeah. But he would put me against men. He would let me take my lumps. But then they also, like, I get messages from them on Facebook. Some like, man, I remember when you used to come to the base gym and you used to do us in. And but that's what bred and started the breeding to what Bellevue West became as a freshman, joining the varsity team, playing. I had to leave middle school in the seventh hour. They would bus me over to the high school, and then that's how I was able to be on the varsity team as a freshman.
Yeah. So talking through that, I mean, in high school, football, basketball, baseball, I think you're all stating in all three at some point in the high school journey. But when you're that good at any one of those, if you want to take it to the next level, oftentimes you'll get feedback that, hey, maybe you need to focus on one of these. And so talk a little bit about, having one, success in each of those, but two, probably a level of passion for each of them as well, and having to make a choice on where you're going to focus in that time frame.
Well, the crazy dynamic of that all was that I actually was best at football. Football was a sport I was the best at. And, but as I told you, I was a free thinker. So, junior, senior year, I was looking at collective bargaining agreements of the leagues and really getting to an understanding of how it worked. And when I looked at the math of football, the math wasn't mathing for me. It wasn't added up. Here, I'm going to give you my body, my sweat, injuries. I'm risking this all for you to say at the end of the day, I'm 4 or 5 years in and I'm still him. I'm still the guy, but you just feel for business purposes, it don't work for me no more. Then you can just let me go. So my contract ain't my contract, basically.
Yeah.
And back then, the bonuses aren't the bonuses that they are now. So you can only imagine, you got a $12 million guy, but you only got a $500,000 bonus. So I'm risking all of this. So I'm looking at basketball and I'm like, basketball looks like that's the lick. So my sophomore and junior year, I played football, all state in football. My senior year, I don't play. I'm all state my junior and senior year in basketball. I decide I'm going to focus on basketball. There's 2 focus periods, and I'll tell you both.
Yeah.
My baseball coach was my marketing teacher and DECA teacher. Yeah. And he says to me, Strick, listen, I know you're not going to play football this year, but I think if you play basketball, I know you'll get drafted. I'm looking at him like, man, come on, bro. I know you want me to just play, but come on, man, stop.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, seriously. He's like, I think you'll get drafted if you play. And so I said, all right. So finished the basketball season. I was a little disappointed because we had went to state and went to the finals my junior year, and our senior year was just a total disappointment. So to take my mind off of that, I was like, I agree. I said, it'll just keep the competitive juices flowing. I didn't have that, those lull periods of that time. I didn't want that. So I was like, all right, I'll do it. So I ended up hitting like 456 or something like that.
Yeah.
And, a bunch of scouts come out and I had my partner on the block. We have a show on the block that we do every day, 2 to 4 on 93.7 The Ticket. And we were talking about it yesterday, and my coach was kind of my agent, and my dad and my coach worked together. Yeah. So a bunch of MLB scouts came to Bellevue West, and I'm yarding balls. Show I have an above average arm, speed. They liked it, but a Yankees scout told my coach that if he doesn't play basketball and he just plays baseball, we'll draft him in the first round.
Yep.
And my partner looked it up and he said, guess who was that draft pick that year? Derek Jeter. I said, that could have been Stricky out there in right field.
Number two,
right?
There it is.
So that I thought that was pretty funny. But what happened was the Marlins told my coach, he said, hey, we'll let you do both. And we'll draft you in the middle rounds. And we'll also pay for your school and give you a bonus. I said, wow. So basically, one, I'm the greatest walk-on in Nebraska history.
Facts.
Because they didn't pay for a scholarship, so I don't know what else you call it. But then they didn't have to waste a scholarship, so they got great benefits out of that whole deal. And that's where the second decision came. Yes. Where I was in the second year of my time there. I think I was finishing up long season A or coming into the next season. And they were like, hey, listen, we believe that you'll be a hell of an MLB player, but I also believe that you'll be probably a hell of an NBA player. But at this point in time, we need you to make a decision. Mm-hmm. And they said, if you decide to go the other route, if it doesn't work out, we'll welcome you back. So it really wasn't a decision. It kind of just worked out the way that it was going to work out and didn't have a reason to go back at that point.
I love it. Now, just out of curiosity, when you're performing at the level you are, you've got probably multiple options on where you'd want to go. What prompted you to want to go to Nebraska? I mean, obviously at that point you kind of had the hometown connect, or the home state connect, at least I should say. But what was the ultimate catalyst for you to want to be at Nebraska?
Well, it was multi-layered. One, they had just come off of being in the top 10 ranked in the country that year before. That was something that was pretty significant. Two, again, I was very forward thinking.
Yeah.
So no, in the year before, the Fab Five had just happened,
Yeah.
and we had some talented players in the state at that time with Andre Woolridge, me, Terrence Badgett, who was a redshirt down there, Jerron Boone, who had ties to Nebraska through his dad, Ron Boone, who was a longtime Jazz and Kansas City Royal player, and so it was like one of those things where we're like, this is a program that really doesn't have tradition, like going to a Kentucky or going to a North Carolina or any of those at the time, UNLV, all these UCLA. We're like, let's go make our own name. And so this is why I only took one visit, and I regret it to this day. I should have went on all five. I should have just went and enjoyed the ride. But I was kind of a person, Phil, of integrity, man. It's like I couldn't play people. I couldn't know how I was feeling, and I wanted to make the choice early because I didn't want it to encroach in my focus for my senior year. I didn't want to have to be fielding calls. I didn't want to have to be talking. I just wanted to focus on the year. And so that's where I was a little bit forward thinking, in that I knew that if I went to Nebraska, I stayed home, and I helped that team to do something that it never done, I knew that no matter what happened in my life and in my career, I could always come back.
Yeah.
And here I am.
Here you are. Absolutely. You knew it. So talking through that, your time at Nebraska, I mean, it does, have great results for Nebraska basketball. And I mean, unfortunately, the Monkeys still not quite off the back of the Husker hoops of getting that NCAA run, but it'll happen. It'll happen. But you guys, made the tournament, had some NIT runs. And so as you're looking at that, to your point, you start having success as a player, and the realization that, hey, the NBA is possible comes to be a reality for you. So talk a little bit about the level of work ethic that maybe it took to go from the seventh grader to the varsity, from varsity in high school, all state, to college. And then, just that, I think there's those different levels where you feel like you're giving it everything, and then all of a sudden you learn something new, or you see a whole new level, and you're like, all right, I actually have a next level that I can push myself to. So talk a little bit about that progression for you and the levels throughout your college career.
Again, the way that I can kind of give you a visual of it, Phil, is you look at kids today where they're super tall, super unathletic, don't have good footwork because they could just dominate. They could just shoot over you. They don't really have to work. They don't have to skill develop. They could just do things, and there's nothing you can do about it until they get to a certain level.
That's right.
And so with me, that really didn't transpire because I'm 6'3", very physical. And so I worked on guard skills. I worked on big man skills. I had post game. So I was working on all ranges before that really became a real super thing, right? I was doing that at a young age. So as I got higher and higher, I knew it would be more difficult to raise. So I always had to raise my level. I always took what they have is a MLB mentality. So let's start from that. MLB mentality, and I don't want to curse or disrespect women, but this is what it was: money over bees. Okay. So I never got locked and stocked on, because guys, they get locked on women, girls, and they lose their minds, and then they lose focus. That wasn't me. Although I still enjoyed the youth of my youth. I enjoyed it. Okay. But that wasn't the primary thing for me. So therefore I would be doing things that others wouldn't. When maybe they wanted to go out, or maybe they wanted to go, I'm at the gym, or I'm working. I'm like, Dad, take me to the spot. I'm in there even if I got to be by myself. And so that's how I stayed ahead of the curve. I was 205 my senior year. So I was naturally strong.
Yeah.
I didn't start lifting weights until like my junior year. So I was pretty naturally strong. Um, and this is how the pool goes. The pool is wide. It's like an ocean when you're a youth,
Yeah.
right? And as you continue to move up, it then becomes a gulf as far as talent pool.
Yeah.
And then as you move up, it becomes a lake. And then as you move up, it becomes a river. And then as you move up, it becomes a stream.
Yeah.
The pool gets tighter. It's even worse now because although we had international talent, Dražen Petrovic and Detlef Schrempf, and we had
Kukoc,
Sabonis. You know what I'm saying?
Sevilosha.
We had some, but it was still very Americanized for the most part. So although the pool was big, it was always shrinking. And one thing for me is I was like Michael Jordan in a sense, not from his work ethic. I don't think I worked as hard as him and Kobe and those guys. I'm gonna be honest, but from a standpoint of, I always used negative fodder. Whatever you told me I couldn't do, or whatever you said I'm not good at, or I'm gonna show you that you're wrong.
Yep.
And so there were times when my coach, Danny Nee, I love him to death. He's still my guy. Danny Nee was my coach. Where I knew he was looking at not LeBron, but Jaron. I knew he was looking at Jaron as being the NBA guy for our team. Obviously, Pike went on, Eric Pikowski, and Tyronn Lue, Mikey Moore. We had a good team of a lot of pros. But he would always talk to me and be like, Strick, we'll get you an agent. Get you a nice spot, slide it overseas. We'll make it happen. And I'm looking in his office like, oh, okay. Well, that's what you.
Oh, the wrong guy. That
right. So when I'm looking at the paper, or I had a story with when I was in the it wasn't the CBA. It was like the summer league prior to the NBA, where I was playing, and one of the coaches was Eric Musselman. And who Eric Musselman is. He's out at USC now.
Yeah.
And Eric Musselman was the head coach. And I went down there, tried out. My agent sent me down there, and he was like, he told my agent he can't play. I said, oh, okay. So I made it to the NBA, to the Dallas Mavericks.
Yes.
And got cut in that winter. Went to the CBA, was in Oklahoma. Coach didn't play me, and I told him, I said, listen, coach, I understand you got your player set, but at this point, I'm not going to be a career CBA guy. I'm going back. So you might need to trade me. They traded me to Quad Cities. So I looked on, even my own Omaha Racers team didn't want me. They said it too. So I circled the Racers and I circled West Palm Beach, who Eric Musselman coached. They had a player on their team, Phil, named Mark Macon. You remember him from Temple, probably. Macon was like a perennial scorer. And I'm like, and I wasn't even the starter. The starter on my team was Rick Brunson, who was Jalen Brunson's dad.
Yeah.
Right? So I get in the game, and I'm like, I'm going to put the clamps on this dude. Like, he couldn't do nothing. I'm ripping him. And then I'm working out. I had like 30. I'm working out, and every time I'm scored, I'm talking to Musselman. I'm like, yeah, you better get somebody out here who can cover me. You better find someone who can do something with me tonight. I'm talking crazy to him. I said, this all you got? That's all on your. I'm talking crazy to him, right? Yeah. So when I go back to the NBA, ended up playing a game up in Grand Rapids, had like 40, and ended up getting called back the next day. Go back to the NBA. Musselman then coaching at Golden State. And every time I see him, I don't look at him. I don't say two words to him. And finally, he caught me in the back, and he's like, Strick, I need to apologize to you. I'm sorry.
You're like, I don't want to hear that. I need this to keep fueling me, man.
Right. But yeah, he did. He finally apologized. So I thought that was funny.
Well, I love it. So something I want to highlight in what you just shared there is an element of confidence. And I think a lot of people say, you either have confidence or you don't, and things like that. And something that, I heard you saying, and I think I would say I've kind of lived in my life, is that when you focus on the small wins along the way, the confidence grows, so, Eric showing up and playing well as a seventh grader when he's at the military base. That gave him a sense of confidence, and then all of a sudden as a freshman, hey, I'm playing, and and it just keeps progressing. Whereas I think a lot of people are waiting for like that outside perspective to give them confidence. And you know what? If you only listen to the outside, you may never have gotten the confidence, right? Because you got
Yeah.
coaches around you saying, I don't know, this just maybe isn't for you. But you had built up that confidence in yourself kind of with these small wins along the way, right? And it just was a growing beast. So talk a little bit about that growing confidence and not necessarily looking to get that from outside opinions, but finding that within.
Um, there's probably two ways to discuss that.
Yeah.
A fire contained keeps it within, but you allow yourself to continue to put logs on it so that it's a continual burn, right?
Yeah.
An external fire can be reckless. It can be it can get into trouble. It can spark flames other place, but it can also dissipate depending on the elements. It's the elements of the outside that determine how hard the fire is going to burn, whether or not a contained fire you control.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? You
Yeah.
control how many logs you put on it. You control when you put the logs on it. You control. That's the element of the inside fire, right?
Yep.
The outside fire, if it rains, it can dissipate. If somebody flies a plane over that's been dipped into the water and they drop all the water, they can dissipate it. They can dig trenches and stop it. There's people, when it's outside and it's uncontrolled and it's uncontained, they can be the one that can quench your fire. And so that's why I've always tried to keep it within and keep that fire internal.
Yeah, that's good. I love it. So talking back to, went undrafted out of Nebraska, but still made it to the NBA. And, there's not a lot of guys that are able to do that. But then there's even less guys that can make a career out of it. So talk a little bit about, that locker room dynamic of being an undrafted guy, working to get into a rotation versus, hey, there's guys on the team that were the drafted guys, right? Or there are guys on the team that had proven themselves in the NBA and probably just got opportunities because, the organization felt like, well, we drafted him, we got to give him a shot. Or, hey, we signed him on a big free agent contract, we've got to play him. So talk a little about maybe feeling like coming from behind in regards to, getting into the rotation in the NBA.
I believe my path was plotted out.
Yeah.
My life path. I truly believe that, Phil. And the reason I say that is, I used to have dreams as a kid, and people have dreams. People dream, and they always say dream big. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I honestly, I knew that I was going to play in the NFL or the NBA. It's like because I seen it. It's like I saw it.
Yeah.
And all the obstacles that were put in my place or to try to hinder me or try to block, I still saw it. Yeah. So you weren't going to deter me, right?
Yeah.
So when I went to pre-draft camp, it was in Portsmouth. They had the Portsmouth pre-draft, and then they had the combine or Chicago. And at the time, that's how it was going, right? So I go to the pre-draft camp, and this is where I come up and I tell young players and young people, and you can tell them the same. I say, you never know who's watching. Like, you can't just turn it on when you think the scouts are there or when you think the coaches are there. Because you never know who's watching. And so I ended up getting sick. And I was throwing up blood, and I knew I played terrible through the camp. Yeah. I wouldn't have doubted that nobody would pick me up how bad I played, right? So I ended up having one guy saw me, and it was the Dallas Mavericks. It was the Dallas Mavericks scout.
Yeah.
And he called me up, and he said, and look, I had like 5 points. But I was diving on the floor. I was hounding, even though I was sick as a dog. He saw something.
Yeah.
And I went to summer league that summer. And like you said, They had just the year before drafted Travis Best. I was with the Indiana Pacers.
Yeah.
But I played well enough. This is why they ended up calling me to the team, because the whole upper staff already knew who I was. It's just that Hubie Brown, which was Herb Brown,
Okay.
which is Larry Brown's brother, for some reason just didn't like me. And he just naysayed me, talked me down. And so that was the miss on their early behalf. But it was the Mavericks that called me to vet camp. And so I go in there, and you talked about confidence, right?
Yeah.
Jason Kidd was really in our year, although he came out early. He was really my senior year was his senior year.
Got it.
So our Nebraska team was unsung. Nobody. We went to Vegas, and we're playing all these cities and towns, and everybody's like, Nebraska, they're looking at, and we're beating the brakes off of them, right?
Yeah.
And so we finally got to the final 8 to go to the final 4, and we played Jason Kidd's team. They had 2 7-footers, and Jason, and they were good. And it came down to the end of the game, and I had locked Jason up. He was the number 1 player in the country. I put the locks on him, right? He only had like 5 points. I mean, we pretty much locked each other up. I didn't do well either. It was like I locked him, he locked me. That's how it was. So when I went to vet camp, I'm like, all y'all NBA cats and all y'all other cats, y'all scared of Jason. I'm not. I know. I seen him before.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Done that. Yeah.
So I was in Jason, like almost getting into fights, and I gained respect. And the beautiful thing of it was we had a lot of injuries. Mm. So guys like Tony Dumas, who they had drafted, was on the team. Jimmy King, they had guys, and there was at the guard position there was multiple injuries. And so I said to the coaches, because we couldn't really practice, I said, listen, my point guard position was heavy. It was already thick. Yeah. I said, I'll guard Jimmy Jackson. I said, I'll guard Jimmy. And their coaches was like, no. But when I guarded him, they were like, oh, wait a minute. We found something here. And so they were like, oh, wow. They realized, and I knew the plays from both positions. So it wasn't like I had to, like, they had to stop and run me through. I already knew it. So I was very smart. I was very intellectual. I was driven. And that's how I became, one of the highly sought after players. But I got cut. Yeah. That's when I went to the CBA. I told you that story. Went nuts and came back. Coming back, though, Phil, this is where I saw the opportunity. And I tell this story. I say, when you get an opportunity, sometimes the opportunity is not an open door. The opportunity is a cracked door. Yeah. When you're looking into the other room is where you're trying to get to. This is very vast in this space that you're in now. That other room, you don't know what's on the other side. It's a cracked door. You can peek in and see in, but you can't really get in. So what do you have to do when the door's cracked? You better kick the door open so you can walk through, right? Yeah. And so when I was with the Mavs on my way back, they had just made the biggest trade in history at that time. It was an 8-person trade where they had sent Jason Kidd to Phoenix. They had sent Jimmy Jackson. I don't know where. I think he went to Miami or somewhere else. And they sent Jamal to Miami. Couple other players. And they brought in like Chris Gatling. They brought in Sean Bradley. Yep. From Philadelphia. They brought in Steve Nash. They brought in Finley. It was just this big old AC Green too, right? It was just this huge trade. I think that was all of them. Yeah. And they weren't all there yet. And I had flew to Vancouver, and I said, they've got to play me. Kick the door open.
I love it.
And I had like 12 that game. The next night, we only had 7 players, so you had to be in shape, and you had to play how you play, right?
Yeah.
Then when the next night we played Sacramento, Phil, and Mitch Richmond was an all-star.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I guarded Mitch Richmond. I had like 25. He had 21. Wow. And that's when I didn't come off I was a starter the rest of the year.
That's amazing. Well, I want to highlight what you said there, and that is, you know, sometimes you have to kick open the door because you can't see it, but you see the opportunity. And I think it ties into what you mentioned before that. And, a phrase we use a lot is stay ready so you don't have to get ready, right? And it's like,
Facts.
I mean, one, that's obviously from a physical standpoint for you as an athlete at that time, but I think two is the mental side, right? It's so easy to get in your own head and be like, oh, well, this guy's starting, like, I might see 2-3 minutes, and then all of a sudden an injury happens, or all of a sudden a trade happens. And it's like,
Yeah.
man, if you're not in the right mental spot, that small crack that you thought you saw, that closed. That next room isn't going to be found.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that happened in around 2000. Yeah. I had opted out of my contract. I was absolutely miserable because I got traded to New York and then to Vancouver, and I was miserable. I don't advise people to do this because I gave away like $6 million. I don't advise anybody to do that. But I can tell you I had the best time as a player, even though I wasn't making the money. So this is why I say it's not always about the money, but I still don't think you should give it away, right?
Yeah,
you can still try to work it out with you still having it.
Yeah.
But I got to say I had the best of the rest of my career because it wasn't even about the money. Yeah. But I ended up, I had an agent, wasn't really good. He was telling me a bunch of stuff, but there was reasons behind it. And I'm out in LA, I'm training, I'm working with Magic Johnson. We're playing every day. Everybody leaves to go to camp. Players are like, why are you still here working out? Why are you at camp? And like my agent said, he's talking to somebody. And then one of my guys called another agent, which was Jamal Tinsley's agent at the time. Oh, yeah. His name was Raymond Brothers. And he called Raymond. He's like, yo, Strick is still down here working out, man. Like, whatever. And Raymond called me and he's like, Strick, what are you still doing there? I was like, man, my agent told me this. He told me that. And I'm like, he's like, give me 30 minutes.
Oh, no.
He calls. And he literally called back in less than an hour, 30, 40 minutes. And he says, Boston wants you right now. I said, what? He says, I need you to call your agent. I need you to fill out paperwork to fire him, hire me, and you'll be on your way to Boston, if not tonight or tomorrow.
Wow.
I said, whoa. So I called my agent. I tell him the situation. I said, he says, wait, I talked to Boston. I said, nah, bro, it's all right. It's all right. Don't call him. Don't do nothing. Just it's a wrap. Fill in, sign the paperwork, and we're gonna move on. Oh no, man, wait, no, bro. So I ended up going to Boston. They had already went through training camp. I was one of the best in my life. I didn't have to go through training camp. I was like, yes, but this is what you said, Phil. Stay ready, so you don't have to get ready.
Yep.
I came in. They were already 2 games in, and I think I started playing pretty quickly, like within 2 to 4 games, I started playing. They had a guy on the team, and this will answer your question. They had a guy on the team, and Joe Forte, and he played. Joe Forte out of North Carolina, huge scorer. He was a perennial scorer.
Yeah,
but he didn't want to work. He thought it should have been gifted. He thought it should have been given. He thought it should have been handed to him. We had Kenny Anderson there. Yeah. I'm a dog. Paul Pierce. They had just drafted Joe Johnson. You're not going to beat him. So, he had to work. Yeah. And he didn't want to work. So I came in and just took it from him. You know what I mean? I'm like, shit, you don't want it? Stricky will come get it. Me and Kenny battled every day in practice. 2 lefties going at Kenny Anderson. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
When he would be called to do the extra work as a rookie, he didn't do it. He wouldn't do it. He would go half-ass. Can I say that?
Yeah,
He'd go half-ass. He'd go half-ass. He wouldn't go hard. And then when he get in the game, the speed was too fast for him because he wasn't working at speed.
Yep.
He wasn't ready, and he ended up out of the league in 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and so something that I think, is a good takeaway. Someone listening today is saying, well, I'm not going to play in the NBA, but it's a life principle.
It's a life lesson.
Eric, you focused on what you could do best, and that was what you brought defensively. And
Yep.
then you figured out how to add the offense to it, right? And I think for
Facts.
so many people, they want to focus on the thing that's, the sexy or attractive thing. And sometimes you got to figure out the dog fight, and then you can do the white glove part of the job. And it's like, but a lot of people don't want to do the dog fight to get to the white glove part of, whatever season of life they're in. They might be starting a company and they say, I want to be done at, 4 p.m. It's like, you can be done in 4 p.m. It's just, this isn't going to be a good business for you long term, or whatever it is. It's like there are those seasons where you got to do the dog fight to get to the white glove opportunities.
And yeah, what are you going to do? What are you going to do in that time frame? Like, what hours are you going to, because that's what I did. I would show up early, I would leave late. You talked about that same thing. I always wanted to go against the best.
Yeah.
So I would shoot with Hubert Davis. I would shoot with Reggie Miller. And against them, like, who can make the best? And because I knew it would make me better. If I'm going against the worst shooter in the team just to make myself look good, it doesn't work.
Right.
So you're right. It's one of those things where you don't always want to be the smartest guy in the room. You don't always want to be the best player on the team. You don't always want to be the guy. You want to be the one who you recognize and realize how you can get in. And then you learn how to expand your territory once you're in.
Yeah.
Everybody can score. Everybody wants to score. What are you going to do? Why is Dennis Rodman Dennis Rodman? Why is even Draymond Green?
Yep.
Because they figured out what they can do to add value. Figure that thing out. How do you add value? Not what's the sexiest, not what's the smartest, not what looks the best from the inside or the outside in. None of that. Figure out how you can get in, listen, be a sponge, soak it up, and then navigate and figure out how you can expand. That way you become valuable and not invaluable.
I love it. Now, to tie into that, you obviously had, with the different teams, many amazing opportunities to see, learn, and compete against some of the greatest to ever play, right? I mean, you talked about in Dallas, a Jason Kidd, a Steve Nash, New York. What that would have been like the Charlie Ward,
that was Charlie Ward, Spree, Allen
Houston, and then I mean, you got great players there in Boston. You talked about Paul Pierce. Was Antoine Walker part of those teams? Kenny Anderson, Indiana. Yep. You got the Travis Best days. Maybe Ron Mercer.
Toughest draft, arguably.
Yeah.
96.
Oh, absolutely.
Look at Twan, Ray Allen, Allen Iverson, Steve Nash. Who else?
Sharif Abdur. No.
Sharif Abdur.
Sharif.
No. Yes.
Yeah, I think Sharif was in that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can keep going down. Marcus Camby.
Yeah.
It was.
Peja.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying, like, when I look back at it, Phil, I'm like, well, shoot. I mean, hey, I understand. Marbury, Stephon.
Yep. Yeah. And so as you got to compete and, play alongside those guys, something I think people wonder about is, what is it that makes them different? Because once again, there's so many people that come through a league, but, were there any specific things that really stood out to you about, the players that you played with that were, the ones that'll go down in the history books of, household names?
Like, the reason Reggie Miller is just work ethic was just crazy.
Yeah.
Mentality, professionalism. Like, when you see guys like that, and even Steve Nash, just footwork and, even with injury, just trying to just stay in the weight room and get stronger, because, I actually was a starter over him, but when he first got to Dallas, and he recognized, shoot, I better get strong if I need to deal with Strick every day. Like, I just can't just be out here just, being willy-nilly. And he understood things like that. You love that competitive edge of like Paul, like he didn't care. He wanted Kobe. He wanted LeBron. He's like, I want them. These guys that just literally don't cow down or run away from the challenge, man. And Allen Houston, consummate professional, just came in, did his work, family man. I got to learn a lot from guys just watching and observing them. Allen Iverson, one of the littlest guys, buck 60, 70 dry, wet, but had the heart of a lion, just relentless, right? So you get to see all of this. It inspires you. It warrants you to continue to be better, because I wouldn't have had a 9-year career if I didn't, continue to challenge myself to be better and to make myself valuable.
I love it. Well, Erick, I know we are at about time for what I had asked of you, and I just want to say thanks so much for sharing your journey, your story, and the amazing things that you've done. And if you're open to it, maybe we can record a second episode and talk about the businesses and things that have come out. Yes, sir.
We'll do it, man. I'm down with a part 2. No problem.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you.
All right, my brother. Appreciate you.